Welcome everyone to the American Planning Association St. Louis Metro Sections webinar today on climate action planning. The Public Advocacy Committee hosts 2 webinars a year during the luncheon time through the Communications Committee. So this is our next one on climate action planning. We want to thank everyone who attended our last one on missing middle housing. It was a great success, and that can be found on our YouTube channel. This will also be on our YouTube channel after this presentation today. So if you know anyone that was unable to attend, please let them know and they can watch it then. It's a pleasure to introduce Heather Navarro today. She's our moderator. She's the Midwest Climate Collaborative welcomed Heather as their new director on January 28th, 2022. Heather most recently served as the alderperson in the city of St. Louis, where she spearheaded a host of climate forward legislation, including the first building energy performance standard in the Midwest, solar ready requirements, and an EV ready building code, among many other accomplishments. Heather previously served from 2013 to 2020 as the executive director for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, a statewide environmental advocacy organization. In that role, she was actively engaged with the Mississippi River Collaborative, the Missouri Clean Energy Coalition, and many other collaborative efforts. A Washington University graduate, Navarro earned both a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and arts and science in 2001 and a JD from the School of Law in 2008. Her legal practice was primary with a public interest law firm representing clients in racial and disability discrimination matters. In addition to this experience, Heather was a fellow with the Public Leaders for Inclusion Council in 2021 and have served on the Missouri Municipal League Board, as well as a variety of other local, state, and national boards. It is my pleasure to introduce Heather today as our moderator. I just want to thank the panelists for being here today. It's exciting that we're able to host this as a webinar and have so many great ideas and partnerships throughout the Midwest today that we'll be presenting. So I'm going to give the floor to Heather, and also please hold your questions until the end. After the panelists give their presentations, then you can start asking your questions. Heather has a few that she will be asking them as well. But again, please hold your questions until the end of the 3 panelists presenting. Thank you so much for everyone's time today, and enjoy climate action planning.
Great, thank you, Rachel. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And as Rachel said, I'm with the Midwest Climate Collaborative, and we're a relatively new collaborative. We're a cross-sector group with up to 45 members now, with a focus on the Midwest, a vision for a carbon neutral, climate resilient, interconnected Midwest region. And that interconnected piece is so important, and that's part of why we're here today, so that we can be learning from one another. As Rachel said, I just started in January, so this last year I've really had a wonderful chance to be networking, traveling all over the Midwest, meeting folks from Cincinnati to Madison to Des Moines to Salina, Kansas, Columbia, Missouri, all over. And a lot of folks are talking about this issue of climate action planning. And I think one of the unique situations many of us in the Midwest find ourselves in is that we are often in states that are not leading the way. And so you've got a lot of folks who are oftentimes in departments of one or relying on volunteer commissions, trying to find the resources and best practices in order to embark on climate action planning. And that's why I think it's really great to have this group of folks here today with us. They're all in different phases of climate planning. Some have experienced it in a variety of communities. Others are just getting started with their community engagement. And while this is an opportunity to really learn from one another, it's also a chance for us to hold up and celebrate local leaders in the Midwest. And I'm really honored to be here with this panel today, because they are doing some really incredible work. You have their full bios in the program announcement, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but I will just introduce each of them briefly, give them a few minutes to give you some background, and then we're going to have a panel discussion, but really a conversation. We've talked a few different times, and I think it's really great just to be able to hear from each other and again, what everybody's learning, and then I look forward to hearing your questions as well. So I'm going to start off with Jeremy Caron. He's the Sustainability Program Manager for the city of Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm also going to share a few slides here, Jeremy. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, while she's getting that pulled up, just to give everyone a little background on me, I have, I'd say about 15 years of public service now across 2 state governments in Maine and Massachusetts, and now with the city of Des Moines. But really, my career started out in the building construction trades and my education as well, and then slowly migrated over to public administration and environmental policy in my undergrad work, and then my master's in sustainable design from Boston Architectural College before moving to the Midwest and finding this opportunity with the city of Des Moines. And just to give folks a little background on the city of Des Moines, we're a community of about 220,000 now and growing rapidly in the metro area. We're consistently hitting some of those top cities for living, recreating, visiting, and especially in the Midwest as well. And excited to see those opportunities to build a stronger, more vibrant and exciting city for people to visit and live in. We have a strong, diverse economy in financial services, insurance, and ag-related businesses, as well as food production and distribution. And a lot of your data on the web is being stored here in central Iowa through Facebook and Google and Microsoft data centers. So a lot of energy demand in our region as well. So climate action and sustainability work in the city of Des Moines has been a focus of the city for over 10 years now. Mayor County, Frank County, is very active in leadership circles, both regionally, nationally, and internationally. He currently serves as the president of ICLEI Global, which is an organization for local governments working on sustainability. And he's actually over at COP27 right now, advocating for more cooperation with local governments and more support for local governments. And he's really been the main driver that started things off, but a number of other council members have really helped build momentum over the last decade around sustainability also and climate planning. And then we also have a citizen-led sustainability task force that was really the main driving organization, advocating for the need for a climate action plan, advocating for the need for my position. And so that's what's really driven this effort over the last several years. And finally, we were able to pass some fairly aggressive climate goals in early 2021. We were the first city of our size nationally to adopt a 24/7 carbon-free electricity goal, and that's by 2035. We also have aligned our greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets with the Paris Agreement and international best practices, looking at a 45% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And those are the goals that are really underpinning the mitigation component of our climate action planning. We started our climate action plan early this year in 2022 and really hit the ground running in May with our engagement efforts. And it's really a tool for decision-making, policy, and programming that'll give us a roadmap over the next several decades and help us to prioritize the specific solutions and actions that can make a real difference in our community. And we're really trying to empower and engage community members in this process and build equity and inclusion into our framework from the very beginning. And that's been underpinning all of our work on engagement with the public and really critical to moving our planning process forward. And we're about halfway through our planning process now. So we actually have a big public open house this evening where everyone's invited to come and provide their thoughts and ideas on solutions and actions and help us refine those and identify barriers that they see in this helping the city meet its climate goals and offer ideas and support. So next slide, Heather. So this just gives you a quick overview of the key focus areas that we're looking at through our climate action planning efforts. We've got 7 key focus areas that ranges everything from energy use and resources all the way up to food security and waste management over to natural systems and specific climate preparedness and resilience solutions that we can implement as well. And underpinning all of these are guiding principles of equity, innovation, green economy, and health and welfare for our community. And so we're trying to embed those ideas into the specific actions that we'll be taking through this planning process and really trying to maximize the benefit across those guiding principles for the community also. Next slide. And just a quick overview of our engagement approach. As I mentioned, we have our public open house tonight, but we're really using a lot of different strategies to engage with the public through an online community workshop, 2 online surveys, community conversations and pop-up events. We're having some small focus groups with specific organizations, and we built sort of a core of community climate allies that's 50 to 60 different organizations and individuals that are change makers or represent community-based organizations, especially those working with frontline communities or the people that might be most impacted by climate change or have been as well. I mean, we've in the last couple of years experienced 2 derechos, substantial stormwater flooding. We had a storm in 2018 that dropped 10 inches of rain for a 4-hour period and inundated our stormwater systems. And so there are a lot of people living in our community that have already lived through and experienced these challenges. And we're working to help them overcome those and build a safer, stronger community. And you can't do that without hearing their voice or representing their voice in the planning process, building buy-in with them, and making them a stakeholder in implementation of our plan. So that's really our focus on the engagement side, to really build those relationships and partnerships so that we can drive this plan forward once it's complete. And with that, I'll turn it back over for our next speaker.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. And I don't know if everybody yet knows what a derecho is. Could you just explain that real quick?
Yeah, so a derecho is a straight line windstorm that has hurricane force winds and just kind of sweeps across a swath of land and can, take out trees, tear roofs off houses, and cause, power outages across regions and significant amount of loss of tree canopies that are really important here in the Midwest for heat mitigation and can really impact people's daily lives. A lot of folks in our community lost power for 7 days. And that was in the middle of the pandemic when we're all working virtually too, right? So presented a lot of challenges, both from a human health and welfare standpoint, but also from a productivity and economic impact also.
Great, thank you. Well, wonderful. And next we're going to go to Jamie Hofling, who is with us from Douglas County. And Douglas County, Kansas, I should say, and she's a sustainability impact analyst and a food waste reduction specialist. So, and I'm going to go to the next slide, Jamie, and you can direct me through these. So thanks for being with us.
Great, thank you, Heather. So while she's pulling those up, I'll just say that I actually have completed my food waste reduction grant. That's what brought me into the office of Douglas County Sustainability. And now I am full-time working on climate action planning. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Fortunately, food waste is a little behind me now. Yeah, starting here with the local groundwork. Actually, Heather, could you pull back to one? I think I have one slide before this that just has all the people in our office. We're pretty proud because Douglas County is a relatively, I guess that slide's not there. I thought there was a slide of all of the pretty faces of the people who work in my office. But we have an office of 4 people full-time, and we have 1 intern who works in our office. We're up in Northeast Kansas. The county seat is Lawrence. Some of you might be familiar with KU, University of Kansas. So we are a college, Lawrence is a college town, and Douglas County outside of Lawrence is quite rural in nature and has a very strong agriculture base here in Douglas County. So we have a pretty strong urban rural combination here. And our county is about 120,000 people, the bulk of people living in the city of Lawrence, and our office is based in Lawrence. And until recently, it's important for you, since you all are mostly city planners, to know that our sustainability office started as a city county combined office. And last year it was decided that we would separate those offices and have a county sustainability office and a city sustainability office. So Lawrence has its own sustainability director, and our county has a director, and I do work in the county. So came on working for the city county, and now I'm just with the county. But our plan is going to be community wide. So it'll involve all of the cities of Douglas County, the unincorporated areas at large. So it'll be the entire county. And the background for this plan, and it is in the works, by the way. I'm one of the people on here on the panel that represents a county that has not yet written our plan. So we're still in the process of it. But we do have a lot of background and a lot of work that's already been done to help us get to where we are today. And one of them is the Plan 2040 that was adopted in late 2019 by our city and county commissioners. And it really sets the vision for our future, and it calls specifically for a climate adaptation plan to address climate change and the threats that it poses, and also to monitor and help remedy air quality complications in our area as well, including indoor air quality. And then we're also part of a regional climate action plan. There's 9 counties that, and you can kind of see them on the slide here. And you can see where we are in reference to the other counties. We're on the far west end of that regional map there. And it's to get to net zero by 2050. And we're using that as a strong base for our plan as well. So there's strategies, high level strategies, recommendations in that plan that we'll be presenting to our community to see which ones are going to be best at the local level. So next slide, please. So our climate action plan that we are working through primarily will be reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll have a great greenhouse gas inventory done for 2021, adapt and recover from the risks of climate change at a very local level. So we're looking at all the vulnerabilities of the cities and the unincorporated areas of Douglas County and striving to adapt and recover from those particular vulnerabilities. And then we'll make recommendations and strategies in our plan. And we are centering equity in this, as a lot of cities and counties are doing, fortunately, as part of their climate action planning. And I'll get into a little bit more about how we're doing that, because we're leading with those voices. We have not put a pen to paper yet, and that's very deliberate on our part. So I'll say more about that in a little bit. And next slide, please. So the first phase of centering community voices was to complete surveys. So we had 600 plus surveys that came in. We were just asking very basic kinds of questions like, how do you get around in the community? How do you stay healthy? How do you keep cool? How do you stay warm? What would you change about those things? Just to really connect with people's everyday lives. So we didn't ask questions like, what do you think about climate change? We left those off so that we could get more at the heart of what people valued and what they were concerned about. And then we also hired what we call community coordinators through one of our local nonprofits to go out and speak with their networks of people. They had connections with networks of people who were considered more vulnerable for Douglas County. So people of color, low income, houseless, and people in the foster care system, things like that, people like that we could get direct information from about what their concerns were about climate change. And 115 interviews were done, and those are all archived, and we're infusing those into our plan as well. Next slide, please. So our office, like I said, is made up of 4 people, and 3 of us are working, or 5 people with our intern. 3 of us, 2 full-time and 1 intern, are representing the staff lead on this plan. And then we have a staff advisory team. So we are making sure that all of the departments within the cities I mentioned, Lawrence, Eudora, Lecompton, and Baldwin City are our cities here in Douglas County. We've brought them onto a staff advisory team and also county staff as well, to make sure that our plan is aligned with other plans. So that was really important to us to not just completely shoot for the stars without looking at what is already being done. So we really wanted to make sure this is interdepartment related. And then we also have a steering committee, and that's made up of community leaders to help us make sure that we're reaching as many people within the community as possible. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And here's where we are in the current timeline. We did have, we started off with a bang with this, and then our office split from the county to the city, and pandemic happened. A lot of things happened that kind of slowed us down, but we were right back at it again now, and we are doing additional outreach. So we found out from our looking back at our data through the community surveys that we did and those interviews that were conducted, that there were still a lot of people we had not heard from yet, mostly the rural areas and others. And I'll get to the what we're going to do next here in just a moment, but we're striving to have our plan adopted in summer of 2023, probably late summer of 2023, so next year. Next slide. So this is the stage that we're at right now. We are conducting focus groups to try to fill those gaps in the community that we have, that we found out from looking at our analysis. And we have done the first responders one. We've done one of the rural Douglas County Township focus groups. We have human services and housing on Friday this week, and then we're doing the outdoor workers one. And then the other ones are after that. So what we're doing in those focus groups are bringing together community members, and you can see the picture there is of one that we did in Eudora, and we're asking a variety of questions, focus group style, and then having them provide information to us that will be used in our plan. And we're sharing a little bit taken from the regional vulnerability assessment to kind of give them a sense of what our vulnerabilities are for our area. And I think that's my last slide.
Great, thank you, Jamie. You guys have done, I mean, I'm always impressed by the community engagement work that you're doing, so thank you. And then next, Geoff Milz. And Geoff is with Pennrose. So Geoff is, I've known Geoff, I met Geoff, I guess, when he was still in Coleraine, Ohio. So he's had a variety of positions. So one in Coleraine with the township, doing planning, I believe. And also he was in Covington, Kentucky as a city development manager. And he is now the director of development for Pennrose in the Ohio region. So Geoff, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everybody. A little bit about me. I'm a planner. I'm on the board of trustees for the Ohio APA chapter. Planning is sort of the frame through which I've done almost all of my work and continue to do. My background is in environmental science. That was my undergraduate degree, and then my master's was in community planning, where I focused on sustainable agriculture. Heather was talking about that a little bit earlier, or I was talking to her about that a little bit earlier. And how sustainable agriculture can be a tool for rural community development. So that was sort of my passion in my younger years. I graduated into the recession and there were no jobs. And so I cast a wide net and ended up in central New York, where I did urban planning and economic development, purchasing development rights on farmland to preserve that farmland, which was really fun and rewarding work. Started a family though and wanted to be back in Cincinnati. And so I moved back to Cincinnati and became the planning director for a first string suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio called Coleraine Township. And Coleraine is, it's the 16th largest place in Ohio. It's a distinction that we trumpet. It's a large unincorporated township, which is kind of an odd sort of form of government. Usually townships are lower in population, provide less services, but Coleraine is a community of 60,000 people, built primarily right after World War II, and it's different from what I'm hearing described here from the city of Des Moines and Douglas County. In fact, I'm very jealous. the leadership that you all are providing and have in the form of your electeds, because it's a different environment in Coleraine. So so Coleraine is a very conservative place, and in fact, you know, these days the political spectrum is kind of odd, right? I think we can agree. And I've noticed that there's sort of establishment conservatives and non-establishment conservatives. So this community that I was working in would be like non-establishment conservatives. So and so doing the work of climate action planning in a community like this takes a different form, right? So we don't talk about climate action planning at all, in fact. And so, but it's important, and the work needs to be done in these places. And so, you know, my perspective on this panel, I think, is coming at it a little bit sideways. Understanding that it's important work, and how do you operate in a political environment that is not favorable to the language of climate action planning. Enter our work here. So, and I want to say that the way that we do that, if I cut to the chase here, is through planning. So through comprehensive planning, through facility master planning, and talking about the needs and the desires of the community without using jargon that is associated with politics, frankly. Okay, so what we ended up talking a lot about was fiscal responsibility, about being prudent with the resources that we have, and not being wasteful. That message resonated very well in my community, because we were the home of the regional landfill. So waste was ever present and always on our mind. It was the highest point in our community was the landfill. And so it was sort of a beacon and a reminder to everyone of where the region's waste goes. But I would suggest, and as we move through the program here, I'll probably reiterate this theme, that there is tremendous amount of power in planning and using planning processes to set agendas. Okay, and so that it's not coming from, for example, staff. Doesn't need to be putting their head on that chopping block every single day. What they can be doing is lifting up the voices that are in the community, talking about connectivity that we all want, walkability, you know, obviously that we all want, and fiscal responsibility and fiscal sustainability. So we were able to do some pretty interesting things in a place that and the work that we did, I think, kind of raised some eyebrows. Like, wow, Coleraine, really? You guys are building the first solar outside of the city of Cincinnati. That's pretty cool. And we put that on one of our buildings as a result of a facility master plan process. Through the comprehensive planning process, we were able to outline, through partnership with our regional, our MPO, regional planning organization, we were able to talk a lot about energy, talk a lot about conservation and parks. And so with this broad planning framework, what we do is we pluck initiatives out of these plans and we put them into our, what we call our strategic plan, which is more tactical, but a strategic plan. We budget for those strategic planning initiatives, and that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where things get implemented and change starts to occur, which is really exciting. And that's where we all live as planners, in the middle of that hurricane, which is probably the wrong metaphor to use in climate action planning, but it is what it is. Sometimes it feels like we're in the eye of the hurricane, doesn't it? But in any case, so, and just to wrap up my story real quick, I recently transitioned from the public sector, where I spent my entire career, to the private sector, where I'm working to develop affordable housing, and it's my passion to make that sustainable, affordable housing, because I think that the sustainability piece is a third leg of a stool in affordable housing that people don't talk about. The cost of utilities is really important, and so continuing the work in a different form now.
Great, thank you, Geoff. It's wonderful. So you all have touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious how the process got started in your communities. And I know, I mean, Jeremy, you talked a little bit about your mayor, but if there's anything else you can add, especially in terms of, you know, once you get that, so whoever got that initiated, you know, did it come from the community? Was it an elected leader? And then, you know, how do you make the case to get others on board. And I know, Geoff, you just talked about that a little bit, but we just would like to hear from you all in terms of how you get this ball rolling, given your unique challenges, whether maybe you don't call it climate, or, how do you start a planning process that resonates with the values of the people in your community? And let's see, I'm going to start this off with Jeremy.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I did. So I mentioned how our climate action planning effort got started through our mayor and our sustainability task force. But to make that really happen, we also had to get our other elected leaders, our city councilors on board, and city administrator or city manager on board and supportive of pursuing this as well. The city's had a lot of disparate programs and initiatives around sustainability and climate that they've been doing for a number of years, and some of them are more they don't talk about them being climate related, like our investments in stormwater infrastructure and in our urban forest and the natural benefits that those provide. So it's figuring out how to appeal to those folks in leadership in terms that they understand. And Geoff certainly spoke to this to a degree also, but there's significant benefit in reducing energy burdens for low to moderate income individuals, which is important to several councilors that represent those certain areas of our city on council, and talking about the economic benefit to our local companies, especially our corporate partners who are starting to think about ESG, environmental social governance, which is gaining steam in their sectors as well. And one of the ways that I approached this with our city manager, who comes from a financial background, was actually talking about bond ratings and changes that are happening in that sector of the financial sector, and how that could impact the city and city investments moving forward. And that by doing climate action planning, we have a better understanding of how to mitigate risk to our community, and we can show those bond rating agencies that we're planning for that and taking the steps to address those issues and those shortcomings in our community. And I think that was really important in building the momentum both within the administration and amongst the elected officials to move this plan forward. And Jamie mentioned, the team that's behind the planning effort, and I'll just touch on that real quick also. I'm the lone staffer in the sustainability office. I actually have my first staff person coming on board November 29th. So I'm super excited to hand off a portion of my workload to them and help me move some of these initiatives and projects forward. But we also built a core project team of leadership from different departments throughout city government, from public works and IT to our planning staff. Were certainly instrumental in getting this project going and represented on our core project team. And then we have several stakeholder committees, including a steering committee made up of leaders from environmental organizations, community-based organizations, our utility, Mid-American Energy, and some local businesses that provide input. And then we've gathered a technical advisory group of academia and subject matter experts from throughout the community that are lending insights on specific topics and specific actions and the impact that those could have on the community. So all of those minds and all of those ideas are critically important, but I'll reemphasize that it's the community voice, the voice of the folks that are going to be feeling the impacts of this, and especially those that are underserved and on the front lines of climate change that are most important to this planning process.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. And then how about you, Jamie? And then Geoff, feel free to pop in after Jamie.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of parallels with what Jeremy shared. So I'll just try to add a few here in terms of, I mentioned the stakeholders. Well, in my presentation, I mentioned the Plan 2040, the comprehensive plan, which calls for a climate action plan. So that was really the origins of it. And, I would say that our city, when we were a city county office, a joint office, Lawrence having the largest population of people, and it really took a lot of the resources from our office. We're focused on Lawrence. And one of the things that I've noticed that since we've separated the offices and have become a county and a city office, the county has been able to look more at our operations and think a little bit more about what can we do as a county, and kind of set the stage for sustainability lens more within the whole county, not just city of Lawrence. Lawrence has a long history of being very sustainable minded. I would say Lawrence is an island in the state of Kansas. Geoff, we're pretty similar. Iowa and Kansas are not a lot different politically, but Lawrence happens to be very different. And So yeah, I just want to say that the state doesn't, this will be the first climate action plan in the state of Kansas. And this is a place where we can talk a little bit more openly about climate change and climate action. But even when we went into the rural areas, we were trying out different language and not using so much jargon as well. I think that was really important that you pointed that out, Geoff, because we still do live in a time when this topic can be very politically divided. But back to the county administration, there's a lot of interest in seeing what we can do, and that's what our plan is going to have in there is really going to be our North Star for what the county will do at large. And we're getting to hear from more of our county population. So those are our stakeholders in it, not just the city of Lawrence, who's already on board with this, has wanted it a long, long time. The county is kind of, the unincorporated areas are not quite there yet. So in our focus groups, we're taking time to set the stage for it a little bit more, making sure they understand that we do have vulnerabilities that are a direct result of a changing climate, and explain that to them a little bit without getting into the weeds of all of it. And that is helping us really build that momentum and that trust with our county residents. And my hope, looking at the federal, the IRA and other federal programs that are out there, this really should help set the stage for a lot more funding coming into our area to help us implement the strategies in our plan. So, yeah, there's a lot going on here at the same time, and ours isn't even written yet. So it's sometimes kind of hard to talk about all of the bits and pieces of it, but having the community pulled in, our county leadership, our city leadership, and then also all the different departments, and having them be in advisory meetings where we're asking questions like, how did climate change show up in your work this past month, to get them start thinking about this too. So we're getting all that buy-in while we're building this plan. Hopefully that answers your question, Heather.
That's awesome. Yeah. So how did it get started? So it's interesting. So I became the township administrator in 2017, and I've been working, in government for a long time at that point. And I don't know if anybody else has felt this in your roles, but sometimes it's like there's kind of a vacuum of direction. And so we're all looking at each other like we're all doing our daily tasks. The work is getting done, right? Everybody's doing their thing. The grind is going on. But like, where are we headed is the question that I was always scratching my head about. And so when I became the township administrator, I said, look, we need to clearly identify like which direction we're all going to row in. And so we started to do the strategic plan. And the strategic plan had this big theme. And so as we were talking with our electeds about what the big theme was going to be for 2018, actually it was 2019 at that point, I heard one elected official say, there's this new economy out there and we need to engage the new economy with green initiatives. And I was like, oh my God, this is the first time in like 10 years I've ever heard anybody say that from the DS. This is amazing. So wrote those exact words down, and all of a sudden we were able to embed green, because that word was used, into our strategic plan and into our big theme. So our big theme was clean, green, safe, and prosperous. And so now with that as the big theme, and me being able to repeat his words back to him, and that was the why we're doing it, coming from an elected, that's fantastic. And then we build out goals, and so we had 6 big goals, and based on the theme for the goals were clean, green, safe, and prosperous. And so then we had a green goal, and we articulated what that green goal was, and then we had initiatives, and the way that we build out our initiatives was each well, first we would have, community engagement about what direction the township should be going in the future, particularly the next year. And then we had this leadership retreat. And at the leadership retreat, we have department heads from all the different departments. And the question to them was, how is your department going to be able to support the clean initiative, the green initiative, the safe initiative, whatever? So it's funny though, because the police chief had no problem coming up with initiatives on safety, right? Of course, because that's where his head's at all the time. But when prompted to have the conversation about what are your green initiatives going to be, that was a whole different. That was perhaps one of the first times that the focus, in the police department was like looking around the police office, like, I don't know, how do we make this place greener? And they came up with some great ideas. The fire chief, was like, you know what? We idle our fire trucks all the time. If it's not in our firehouse, then and it's out in it's idling. And why is it idling? And so then the question with the mechanic, the chief mechanic was, why do we have to idle our fire trucks all the time? He said, oh, well, we have these. Well, 5 years ago we had these batteries that had to be charged all the time, and the only way that the batteries wouldn't deplete is if the engine was running, but we got new batteries, so we don't need to do that anymore. And it's like, wow, for 5 years we've been idling our fire trucks, and we didn't need to, because the purpose of the idling was to charge these batteries, which no longer required. So all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, that's cool. And the great thing that we could report back to our electeds and our community was, we're going to be saving money because we're not going to be burning diesel anymore. Really cool. Our fire chief was like, what about biodiesel? We run all these things on diesel. Could biodiesel work in a fire apparatus? And blah, blah, blah. All these conversations started to happen just because we had this planning process. And so that's how it got started. The way it got started was active listening. And so when you hear somebody say like, oh yeah, this is important to me, and boy, if it's an elected official, you use those exact words, plug it into a document, they feel really good about it. They're proud, they have some ownership in it, and that buy-in, and that lasted for quite a while.
Yeah, these are wonderful. Thank you. I'm curious next about what specific resources you all have found helpful. As I've talked to folks, especially across the Midwest, again, in departments that don't have as many resources as they often have on the coast, people have to kind of cobble together a lot of these different pieces. So whether it's finding in-house resources or contracting with folks, maybe for technical assistance around greenhouse gas inventories, or even the community engagement piece. I mean, all of those things take expertise and a lot of time. So I'm curious, if you all can share some of those resources or tools, or maybe it's if you've been able to set up a dashboard and do monitoring yet, anything concrete like that others in this room might be interested to know about. And I'm just going to go in the same order. So Jeremy, Jamie, and Geoff.
All right. So we have a lot of really helpful tools that we've capitalized on for our climate action plan and a lot of our other sustainability initiatives as well. Perhaps I can tackle the first question in our Q&A about the value of ICLEI that it's providing to local governments, and say that we utilize ICLEI's ClearPath tool to do our greenhouse gas inventories, and we partnered with the University of Northern Iowa to do our first inventory in 2017. And then we updated our inventory in 2020 with data through 2019. And that was the baseline emissions data that we provided to our consulting team, the Brendel Group and RDG, to incorporate into our climate action plan. And so having those assessments done prior to starting the climate action plan was really helpful in hitting the ground running, so that we could dive into actually investigating the need in our community and where we should prioritize our actions from that standpoint. We also have an energy and water benchmarking ordinance that was passed back in 2019. And so we've collected 3 years of data on municipal energy and water use, as well as commercial sector energy and water use from property owners 20,000 square feet or greater. So that's about 650 properties, private properties throughout the city. So we have a substantial data set there that's been really helpful at understanding energy and water use in the commercial sector, and how that could impact our progress towards meeting some of our climate action goals. And then we've been working with Iowa State University on a number of research projects over the last several years. So one related to that's looking at food, energy, water systems for the metro area and the overlapping impacts and potential there, really with a goal on trying to produce 50% of our local food need here locally by 2050. And so there's been a lot of analysis on land use and energy and water demand that would be needed to meet that, and how all of those systems overlap. So we pulled in some good insights from that information. And then we're actually starting another project on developing a tool for heat islands and extreme temperatures, and gathering data from the public through an app that we can utilize. And so that's the project that's going on alongside our climate action plan, but will inform implementation of our climate action plan also. And there's a whole slew of other resources out there. We have pretty extensive data on our fleets as well, and are certainly moving down the pathway of fleet electrification and collecting data on, you know, emissions, fuel use, maintenance costs, all of those items, feeding that up into our state level Clean Cities Coalition. And we're using that data to inform our discussions around fleet electrification and alternative fuels. We've added 21 Nissan Leafs to our fleet so far that are used by our permitting and development and some of our parking enforcement teams. We've added our first Ford e-Transit van, and we actually just bought our first electric garbage truck a month or so ago. It'll be a year before we get to see it, but it'll be exciting when we do. And so we're starting to think more strategically about a 5-year plan for fleet electrification. And we've also looked at biodiesel conversions for B100 for our garbage trucks until we can get to a full fleet electrification there. So, but a lot of great data, a lot of great resources, and you really need to figure out how to mine those from your organization and use those to benefit your planning process.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. And I just have to ask, when you have more than one Nissan Leaf, is it still a Leaf, or is it a fleet of leaves? I don't know. All right, Jamie.
Yeah, so I mentioned some of these a little earlier too. We are also using ICLEI to do a greenhouse gas inventory, and we're going to do that community-wide. Lawrence is also doing their own, so we'll be able to extract Lawrence and see what that incorporated and the townships look like without Lawrence, and then with Lawrence, of course, too. And then what I mentioned in my presentation earlier was the regional climate and vulnerability assessment that was done. That has been an amazing tool, and I would highly recommend that any of you that are thinking about doing this to do an assessment and find out what those vulnerabilities are as a result of climate change. That has really been a great tool for us to help explain to our community why we're doing this in the first place. And then we use our regional plan. If there are regional plans that were written within any of the regions that you're part of, I would definitely look into those. Sometimes those can be adopted too, and that's a good way to get started. And then we also have an intern that started looking at other department plans, which has been really great. Climate change wasn't mentioned in a lot of them, but there were other things that were very similar that were mentioned, like a hazard mitigation plan that we have for the region. And transportation plans are a really good place to look at goals that align with a climate action plan. And then that gives you a way to help interact, or a way to interact with other city or county staff and departments. I mentioned a lot about our community engagement, the survey that we did in the beginning, the interviews that were done, the 100 plus interviews that were done around our community to find out what get a pulse from our community. And then furthermore, the focus groups that we're in the middle of right now has been a great tool to hear directly from people and also share a little bit of information too. One that I have not looked at a whole lot, but plan to, and this was something that a steering committee member brought to my attention, is the Climate Mitigation for Resilience and Adaptation Mapping Tool. It was just released in September of this year, and it provides federal level information at the state and county level, has guidance and funding support, and it shows current climate hazards real time. You can drill those down to a county or even a specific city. That's a really neat tool that I've yet to really dive much into. And then also back on the ICLEI tool, not only can they do the greenhouse gas inventories, but they can also do climate modeling. If we have funding, we are going to probably look at that too, which just means they can run models of specific policy recommendations or strategies that would help you see what's going to be your biggest bang for your buck, where you're going to really drive that greenhouse gas emissions down.
Awesome. That's incredible. So tools, I don't have anything to add on tools, but let me, if I could just talk about critical partnerships, which were huge resources for us. So our MPO was a big piece of this. Our Chamber of Commerce was a huge partner. We got a new chamber president who had who shared our values in terms of this being important, and so bringing and did an incredible job. That person did an incredible job bringing the business community together around sustainability and climate. And he started this thing called Team Up to Green Up, and it was a really fantastic way to bring a new stakeholder group into the fold. And then organizations like Donovan Energy, which does work all around the country, but is based in Cincinnati. They did a light assessment for us, lighting assessment, and Urban Canopy Works is a street tree company. So they do street tree consulting, and they're based in Northern Kentucky and do incredible work also. So they mapped all of our street trees and allowed us to start talking about tree coverage and that sort of thing.
That's great. I've started making a list here myself, so thank you to all of you. And I should just mention too, Carla Walker, who's with the World Resources Institute, unfortunately wasn't able to join us last minute today, but she has shared, they're doing some funding for electric school buses, or I think electric buses, not school buses necessarily, but electric buses. And she is their environmental justice and equity director. And I know that she is a wealth of resources as well. So just a little plug for WRI, since Carla couldn't be here with us today. Next, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you all anticipate tapping into some of the federal funding. And I saw this was also in one of the questions in the chat. We are here in the Midwest, and as I talk to folks, especially in Washington, D.C., who are looking out giving out money, I see the map sometimes of where this goes, and there's kind of this big black hole in the middle of the country often. It's really easy for them to identify these places on the coast. And that's one of the things I'm really interested in as the director of the Midwest Climate Collaborative, is how do we draw in more of these resources in the Midwest? How do we get more people to invest in the Midwest as well? So I'm curious, as you're looking at this, the federal funding, and I know there's still a lot of details to come on this, but where you're looking for information, or what opportunities you're seeing in there that you are hoping that your community will be able to tap into. And we'll just go same order too. That seems to be working for us.
Yep. So here in Des Moines, we've been thinking about how to leverage all of these federal funding opportunities. We put ARPA dollars to good work, investing in clean energy systems at a couple of our new facilities, building out about 600 kW of solar that's going to be serving our new animal services facility and our new all-electric greenhouse for our Parks and Rec team. And then we've also put some of that ARPA funding towards our local, one of our local lending agencies, the Neighborhood Finance Corporation, and they're starting up an Energy Advantage program that's going to provide forgivable loans to people to do energy efficiency improvements at their homes in their particular lending regions in the city. And then, we had a once in a generation opportunity with the transport or infrastructure bill, but then we got a second once in a generation opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it's been really difficult as a local government to stay on top of all of the rollouts of these funding opportunities with limited staffing. So that was a challenge in particular with the infrastructure bill. And, we're trying to jump on these opportunities as much as possible when they arise. But I think it's important for us as folks, as planners and as local government leaders, to think about is making sure that you're dedicating the resources to tracking all of these funding opportunities and to, absorbing what's needed to submit for them, getting requests put together for them, and staying on top of that, because these are going to move quick and we're going to have to be aggressive to compete with all of the other communities that are working to get these funds too. But the Inflation Reduction Act presents an enormous amount of opportunity. We're looking forward to taking advantage of the payment in lieu of tax credit opportunities there are for solar, for geothermal, for HVAC systems that we can install at our own facilities. And we're looking forward to building partnerships with some of our local community-based organizations to do energy efficiency improvements for low to moderate income individuals, expanding EV charging infrastructure out into the neighborhoods. Right now, our EV charging infrastructure is centered in our parking garages downtown, and we know that that's not where everybody's going to need to charge, and we want to make sure that there's adequate charging infrastructure at apartment buildings and out in our community centers and neighborhoods, so that people don't have to drive to downtown to charge their vehicles. And then, and I think another big opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act is green bank funding and establishing green banks. So we've have been having some discussions with partners here locally and with our state energy office about the potential for establishing a statewide or a regional green bank that could help drive investment in some of the solutions and actions that come out of our climate action planning process. I will add the caveat that, we just got through the election cycle and we all saw a lot of red and blue maps, and we're a blue dot in a red state, and that red got a little redder. So it's going to be harder for us to make progress at the state level, but we're going to be working with our regional partners like the MPO here and several other organizations to think about how we can creatively fund a lot of these projects moving forward.
Great, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, very, very similar here, but we are in a different stage of our climate action plan. As I've mentioned several times, we don't have ours written yet, but a big part of why we're writing this is for federal funding. It will help position us for access to more funding. And it's a big benefit of working with our emergency management on this. We do have staff advisors from emergency management. We work very closely. It's a big part of what county government does is emergency management. And so we are looking at FEMA dollars and USDA funding for mitigation work, for buying up some private land that's currently private, but it's located in a floodplain area. So there's funding we're looking at for that. And that's actually related to climate action planning, but it's also more related to another plan that we're writing at the same time, which is our open space plan. So we are working with transportation, MPO, transportation, and emergency management on that plan as well. So yeah, both of these plans will position us for different funding opportunities, particularly FEMA, USDA, like block funding, those kinds of things. So that's probably all I have to add to that right now, but it is something we're looking out for. And Heather, I hope to get this list from you when we're finished with this goal.
Yeah. On the topic of funding, I would always say that, I would always hear there's no money, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. There's money, right? It's about priority. And so the approach that I always took was, if we're going to say that next year we're going to be clean, green, safe, and prosperous, right? Then we're going to look around our organization and we're going to find the resources that we have. And those resources are people, those resources are dollars. And we align those resources with our goals. And so each year, if our goal truly is to be, if green is part of that goal, then let's align some resources, people and money to achieving that goal. So so I think it bothers me a lot when folks say, oh, there's no money to do green things. Like, yeah, there is. It's the political will that's missing. It's the prioritization. We need to prioritize it, plan for it, budget for it, and execute on it. And that's how these things get done.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I look forward to seeing what you're all able to draw into your communities throughout this process. And we are working on at the collaborative, working on pulling together some different resources, to Jeremy's point, being able to track these things. So if you're aware of any great resources out there, please send them my way and we'll get them up there. I know that there's a local infrastructure hub that's pulling some of this stuff together, and there's a lot of great webinars as well. So we'll do our best to share those with everybody. I'd like to ask one more question of the panelists, and then we'll use what time we have left to look at some of the questions from the chat. And actually, before I do that last question, I am just going to do a quick plug for the Midwest Climate Summit, which is happening in February 21st to 23rd in St. Louis. There'll be a virtual option as well. So while unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions today, hopefully we can pick up some of these conversations and share resources at that event. The other thing is we have a Midwest climate research agenda. And so for those of you who are practitioners, if there are questions that you would love to see, our academics in the Midwest researching to help advance your work, we want to know what those are. You can go to our website, midwestclimatecollaborative.wustl.edu, and find the form and put your questions in there. We really want to be bridging that gap between research and practice. And so what are the questions that you all need answered in order to move forward? And a lot of that has to do with assessment of different policies. And some of that could also be just getting the information you need to be able to apply for some of these federal grants. So the last question that I'm going to pose to you all before we get to the questions in the chat is, what has surprised you the most in this process? And I'm going to start off with one thing that surprised me as I've been talking to folks. So Jeremy's in Des Moines, and Des Moines is the first city in the world to commit to 24/7 renewables. Paris and London have done it, and they take a lot of credit, but those folks in Des Moines, they're so humble. They just keep their head down doing their work, but they really were the first, I think by about a year before anybody else on the planet had recognized the benefits of monitoring your energy usage 24/7 and committing to 24/7 renewable. And if you want to talk about that, Jeremy, you're welcome to. Otherwise, there might be something else that's really, really surprised you, but would love to hear from you all on that question.
Yeah, I will say that it was a real surprise to get that passed by council unanimously. So overwhelming support from council to drive that goal forward. And so that is one of the major pieces that underpins our climate action plan moving forward, and will inform the specific actions we take that help create that roadmap for how we get there over the next decade and a few years. But committing to 24/7 carbon-free electricity and completely understanding your energy load and available renewable resources from your utility or from local investments in clean energy is a whole nother thing. And then identifying partnerships that you can build with other organizations or companies through private partnerships that can help drive and accelerate the transition to 24/7 carbon-free electricity is critically important. So we're kind of in that fact-finding stage right now. We spent the better part of the beginning of this year renegotiating our franchise agreements with our utility, Mid-American Energy, for our electric and natural gas franchises. We shortened up the period of that franchise so that it aligns better with the 24/7 goal that we created. And then we also signed a side agreement with our utility so that we can start working on specific projects and we're developing our first annual work plan that will target 3 to 4 specific things we can work on over the next year that start moving us towards that 24/7 commitment. And we'll be wrapping up that work plan by the end of this year, and then into 2023 working on implementation there. And so some of the work from that's going to feed into the climate action plan, and some of the climate action plan stuff is going to feed into that work plan. hopefully, is what I'd like to see happen. But to start, we need to work with our utility to get that sort of baseline hourly data profile of community-wide energy load. And this goal is community-wide, not just city facilities. So we need to know our community-wide energy load matched to available resources from the grid that are clean energy on that hourly basis, so that we can start tracking and measuring that. And that's our biggest challenge to start, and exciting to start down this pathway and figure out how to do it.
Absolutely. Way to go. Jamie.
We are on this question about what surprised us, right? Okay, just making sure. Yeah, I would say that what's probably surprised me the most so far in our focus groups was when we were in one of our rural townships. There was a lot of discussion amongst our staff and members of our steering committee and staff advisory that were helping us put together the questions. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not we should mention the words climate at all, and if we should even be promoting it as if we should even be calling it a climate action plan. Maybe we should be using the words green or sustainability or something else. And we decided to take a risk and go ahead and try this out in Eudora. And there were people in the room that did not agree on the science of climate change. Absolutely, you could tell who the people were, but there was not any. There wasn't the kind of backlash you might expect, or that I've seen, at least in my professional role. I have definitely seen. I've heard a lot of backlash when I've given presentations about climate change, and that did not happen in that room. There were 30 people from Eudora. And I would say, a small percentage didn't believe in the science, but they could see that the weather had changed. They were aware that climate was different than the way it had been before. They saw that it was affecting the soil health, and it was affecting agriculture, and that there was less, and just in general, that their children weren't being educated environmentally the way that they had been. So I guess I would say I was really surprised by the amount of respect in the room, and the openness, the curiosity, the open discussion that was being had. And so much that one person in the room even said at the end, "I can't believe there hasn't been a fight in this room. This can be a very dividing topic." And it just wasn't. It really was actually the opposite. It brought people together. So that was really encouraging, and it's extremely motivating for me in this role.
That's really great to hear. And I know when I've talked to Jamie before too, you've talked about just like talking to first responders as well, and how, readily, if you want to mention a little bit about that conversation.
Yeah. I guess Heather, was that what I had told you about first responders as well, that I had gone into that space prepared for hypermasculinity. I thought I'd be in the room with just giant people. When the firefighters have come, and I've been around firefighters, they're very big people and very masculine. And I'm a kind of a smaller person, and I was a little bit maybe thought I would be intimidated, or that I just wouldn't be welcomed. This topic wouldn't be welcome, but no, the first responders were extremely concerned. Firefighters, police officers, sheriffs, everybody that was in this space was extremely worried about what is happening, and what it's doing to their resources, and the mental health of their staff. There was tremendous concern and openness and willingness to engage on this and really work together on solutions. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, Heather. That was our first focus group, and that really set the stage for the rest of them to come. So yeah, and I just pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for us to remember that. I think a lot of us start off with being a little trepidatious entering into these conversations, and really the tide is starting to turn. There's still going to be folks. Just like in any community engagement arena, there's always going to be folks who disagree or question the science. But I think by and large, your experience is what a lot of people are seeing, is that we can go into these rooms, and maybe there'll be some eye rolls at the beginning about climate change or something, but for the most part, people are with us. And I think we need to start we need to move that starting line in order to get to where we need to be. So thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to not assume that people understand the science, that even if they do or do not agree with the science, that leading with just a little bit of information about the very basics of that in a public space is key. I really do think that that's pretty important. The science sometimes comes across as being very convoluted or just really hard to grasp. So finding ways to explain it to people in very bite-size ways is just really, it goes a long ways. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. And Geoff.
Yeah, no, my biggest surprise was very similar to Jamie's. It was that you can do it. Like, no matter where you are, you can do it, right? And it needs to be done. This is such a big issue, and it's so important to all of us. There are so many tangential issues and issues that cut through it and across it or get close to it that it affects, whether you're a farmer and or you're in Iowa or you're in suburban Cincinnati. It affects you, and it may not take the same approach in every instance, but it can be done, and it needs to be done, and that's it made me feel very optimistic about the future in this space, especially because I've been around for long enough I don't know if you guys remember Agenda 21, when people were talking about like the United Nations were going to come take over the world and blah, 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 blah. And so that when I was in central New York, that was a thing. Like, we can't talk about climate because that's Agenda 21. And that's the United Nations trying to run our little town, but the evolution of understanding and the evolution of the dialogue and really the in-your-face reality that we're looking at every day, whether it's a derecho, in Des Moines, or it's a tornado in Cincinnati, or it's flooding in Douglas County, whatever. It's real, and we got to do something about it. And so I think the thing that I was the most surprised about was that we were moderately successful at our endeavor, and we all can be.
Great. Well, really, congratulations to all of you for the work that you've accomplished so far. And I know we don't have time for a lot of questions, but Rachel, are there a few more in the chat that you want to bring home? Thanks.
There's a few. I'm going to start with the first one. It's for Jeremy. Last decade, ICLEI was closely associated with Agenda 21 and was often attacked by the Tea Party members. Many state and communities pulled out of ICLEI over this. How have you overcome this backlash, particularly in Iowa?
So I'm going to be honest and say I don't know a whole lot about Agenda 21. That I was maybe perhaps still finishing undergrad and graduate school when that was happening. But ICLEI as an organization is growing. They're offering an enormous amount of tools and support to local government, and they function as a technical support entity for local governments predominantly now. And we've leveraged that as much as possible to make progress on a lot of initiatives here at the city. It also provides a global reporting framework in coordination with C40 and Council of Government, Council of Mayors. And so that's been really helpful too, to keep us on track with creating metrics and reporting annually and looking at our progress as well. So ICLEI is evolving, ICLEI is growing, and it's the largest advocate for local governments working on sustainability globally, and gives local governments a voice at the table in UN climate talks and G20 and 7 meetings and other international dialogues. So that's really important.
Thank you. Next question. It seems like there's a lot of funding is available for climate resilience in coastal communities, but fewer resources to our landlocked states. What are the best ways to secure funding for climate resilience planning in places in the Midwest?
One of the ways that we've been successful at getting federal dollars is through FEMA and in our EMA partnership with our emergency management agency in terms of risk reduction, hazard mitigation work. That's the first thing that pops into my head.
Thank you. Next question. Here at St. Louis County, we are preparing an RFP for a new comp plan, STO Code 2050, an equitable and sustainable comprehensive plan. Any comments on effectively marrying climate action planning into a comp plan so we can kill two birds with one stone?
That's definitely how ours got started, was in our comp plan. Unfortunately, I was not yet working in this office. I don't know how it got in there, but I could drop the link in the chat or put it in the Q&A chat so that you could take a look at that and see if that's a benefit.
And I'll add that a lot of our early goals that we've been working on in our climate action plan and some of the solution approaches that we're taking are driven by some of the early ideas in our comp plan that was completed about 5 or 6 years ago. That's actually getting updated this year as well. So we have a number of planning staff embedded in our core project team and participating in our technical advisory group. And so they did some high level sustainability themes in the first comp plan. And now they really want to get into the nitty gritty of how to incorporate that for this coming update. And so making sure that you have cross representation across those two planning efforts, or kind of make your comp plan into a comp and climate plan is really important.
And then last question, they just want to thank you so much for your insight and your work. It's budget season. What costs should I be considering when making my budget ask?
I wonder, is that question to just get started or for the overall climate action plan?
Did not state.
So I'll just jump in and say, I did some pretty thorough research on costs of climate action plans when we were putting our RFP together, and anticipated a range of about $150,000 to $200,000 to complete that plan using, a top tier consulting firm. And ours came in around about $180,000. So, and that was in late 2021.
I have a question for the group. So I represent a taxing district here in St. Louis, and we were one of the recipients of the Great Streets Initiative. And we put in sustainable streetscape with pervious concrete, rain gardens, bump outs, slowing down the traffic, change the miles per hour, change the traffic load. You can actually hear the difference when we did the streetscape for the first couple months, how quieter it was. So it was really exciting to be part of this. And we got 2 awards from APA for Great Streets from Missouri and from America. And then recently we just got the Missouri Prairie Foundation Garden of Excellence. And the reason why I'm talking about all these awards we've gotten, we're still the only public streetscape really in this region that has been completed. And we still have been maintaining it for about 10 years. Are you guys looking in your comp plans and your climate action plan by making it a requirement when you do a streetscape renovation to include some aspects like this into it?
I would say that yes, we here in Douglas County, we will be looking at that, but I couldn't speak to any specifics of it yet because we're still at the early stages. But yes, we'll definitely be looking at those.
Yeah, it feels like the only way to make people change the way they do it to put it into policy. So if you get this, if you're going to redo a streetscape or you're going to apply for federal grant and ask for a match, you have to have XYZ included in this plan. So that would be just from my point of view, we can tell how much it has changed our business district and the air quality. And then our, bi-state here just put in electric buses, and we can tell the difference because we're the #1 bus route in the state, over 3 million riders. And the air quality, we can actually see the difference since the electric bus has been put in place here in Grand. So, so it'd just be great to see if, that is some aspect that we can change how people do their streetscape plans and what is a requirement from the county or that municipality.
Did you guys do a greenhouse gas inventory in St. Louis? Do you know if it's shifted or curbed greenhouse gas emissions?
That I'm not aware of. Heather, would you know that?
I mean, I know, and Catherine Warner was on this call earlier, and she would, I mean, I know we've done one. I don't know, how, if that's gone back and looked at that particular street yet, but we should.
Yeah. Great. I see that we have no more questions. So anything else the panelists would like to add? Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone for your time. I learned a lot today. I hope our attendees learned so much, and I can't wait to see what the future of all your communities with your climate action planning. And thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.